presentation, and we'll get going, and then we'll have some drinks on the rooftop after. Very easy. So, oh great, I already have them. Thank you. Perfect. Awesome. And I will ask all of our panelists to just make sure that they are touching the silver part and not the black part, because it can get loud. Haley, tell us when you're ready. Aw, action. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Cinematography for Actors. I'm normally saying welcome back when we are having a podcast. We are located today in Los Angeles, live at 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time to do a virtual production panel. And what is virtual production is kind of our mission today. This is a beginner entry level. I hope it's accessible to everyone. We are joined by our partners, We Make Movies and Easter Seals Disability Film Challenge. So thank you so much for being here. We have a live audience online and in person. And so let's get going. We have a very, like I said, tight hour. So I'll introduce our panelists, which is also my wonderful team of collaborators on the past movie we just did. I am Indiana Underhill, one of the founders of Cinematography for Actors and the cinematographer of Doom Scroll, which was shot entirely on an LED volume. We have beside me John Michael Riva Jr., director of the film. We have Brianna Wing, who was our wonderful producer. We have our virtual production producer and all things tech for virtual production that I will ask today, Dustin Enkelskind. And we have Esme Jackson, who is one of the most incredible production designers I've ever worked with. So I'm stoked to have her a part of the AFI fam originally, but here. And finally, at the end, one of our CFA team members and as well the lead actor for the film, Jack Gibson. Welcome, everyone. Hi.
Pleasure to be here.
Thanks, Jack, for speaking on behalf of our entire team.
Everyone just had their microphones down.
I know. Okay, so let's get started. I want to make this as educational as possible. And so I'm going to open it up because I think the best person to do a definition of what virtual production is Dustin. So Dustin, can you please tell us exactly what virtual production is? Because I have a lot of people saying, oh, is it when you're on Zoom directing from, overseas? And that's not it. So can you define virtual production in the current world?
Virtual production in the current world, it can mean utilizing a variety of technologies. So it can also mean green screen, and it can also mean using LED volumes. And the critical part of it is making it real time. And real time is placing an engine, much like Unreal Engine, on to replace the environment as you would do in post, but now you're doing it on production.
And so can we define for our audience what Unreal is if they're not familiar?
Unreal Engine is made by Epic Games, and it is a platform upon which to build environments, and it handles physics, and it is a creation tool. It's more of a placement tool than a creation tool. You're often bringing in other assets that were made in other programs or scanned, much like we did in our film, where we scanned the clock and put that into our space.
And we will talk more about that with some stills about what scanning is and objects to put them into the environment. Because one of the biggest concerns that we have in virtual production is how do we blur the line between virtual and physical worlds? And that's exactly what we had to tackle. Now, John Michael Riva Jr., who I also call Mikey, and who everyone who works with him calls him Mikey. Maybe we'll just do that.
We can do just Mikey.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Mikey, can you talk to us about what the story of Doom Scroll is and why you chose it for this case study for virtual production?
Sure. The idea, so it comes from a feature, and I had this opportunity to shoot something in, a virtual production world. And this felt like a good, use of showcasing a proof of concept, because the movie that I wrote is very much like kind of jumps time periods, jumps locations, feels like kind of Jumanji meets like The Goonies, where it's like kids trying to figure something out. And I definitely changed the script to fit more of the virtual production world, which turned out to be beneficial because I made a better movie, I guess. So utilizing the tech kind of allowed me to have more confidence that like I could be on a pirate ship. I could be on like a beautiful beach and not think about the logistics of where my producer brain will go when I'm writing, which is like very taboo for a writer to do, is like not sweat that stuff, just like put it on the page. Don't put your producer hat on yet. So like weirdly virtual production put that at ease for me. I'm answering beyond your question already, but I think the reason why I chose this was because I could probably feel more relaxed and confident executing all the stuff from production design to like the Unreal environments. So that's pretty much why I chose that.
Amazing. I'm going to start our little slideshow that I have to kind of define our world and to get you in the headspace of what we had to deal with and approach. So as all first timers, except for Dustin within the virtual production space, Esme has experience with it, just not as a production designer, correct? Yeah. So this was a first time. And so going into something that when you're trying to merge the technical, practical, and creative of filmmaking is hard enough already. And so when you're having to go into a space that is a blank canvas and understand the technology behind it, there are a lot of questions. We shot this out at Row Visual Stage in Chatsworth, and they have a case study program that I will kind of promote because any filmmakers listening or here, they're opening up applications in 2024 to apply with a short film script for people who haven't shot in virtual production. And they will give you free stage time where you can come and work with a team and have mentors and kind of guide you through this process. And so that application will open up in 2024. And this is kind of, we were the third case study team to be first timers on their stage doing virtual production and kind of have our hands held through this process. So here's our stage in Chatsworth at Row, and this is the blank canvas. Now, Dustin, can you explain what the markings on the screen are?
Those markings, that is mostly just a test pattern to describe how many panels there are. So this particular one shows you the size of each panel. That's about it for this.
I never knew that.
Amazing.
And this particular one looks like it has the numbers of each panel, so you can identify if one is having a problem. You can replace that panel.
Great.
Can I quickly say for the people who are on the live stream who definitely probably can't see that, it's an image of a curved LED screen with panels in the form of like a checkerboard with the letters and numbers assigned to them.
Yeah. Great. Thank you so much. Now, one of the biggest considerations when walking onto a stage is the curve of the screen that I've learned and the gaps that exist between the ceiling panels and the floor itself. Because if you're trying to merge the virtual world with the physical world, as a DP and Esme as a production designer, one of the biggest things was how do we block those gaps, or how do I choose my frame size or shot design so that we don't see it, and that definition is never, it's always blurred and it's never defined. Esme, can you talk about walking onto the stage for the first time and ideas you had on how we could kind of fill the gaps?
I think it definitely, first off, just put my mind at ease, kind of in the same way that Mikey was saying. Because even though it was like a 4 or 5 page script, it was the most loaded 4 or 5 page script, where it's like every half a page you're now in a living room, or which theoretically is easy, then a pirate ship, and creating a landscape, which are two of the biggest fears for a production designer, because they're the hardest to make look real and they get very expensive very quickly.
Yeah.
So seeing that space, especially having the 180-degree curve, created a sense of ease, because it became sort of a major crutch that we could lean on and make the space feel more real.
Fantastic. Now, switching over to the next slide, I will explain that because none of you have read this script. It is 3 worlds. It's a beach pirate ship and a house. And the house is daytime and nighttime interior. It's a beach house. And so Esme sent over the floor plans for this presentation so that we could kind of see your thinking around how do you design a physical world that would merge with a virtual world. So Esme, can you talk about knowing the, like, going at ease and having a more limited space to block out? Can you talk about some of your ideas around the beach and the different props and sizing and scaling of props?
Yeah, I think a lot of it too was a learning process. So I can kind of explain of what I thought was going to happen and sort of what really happened. We had heard a bit about using decking it's about 6 inches tall. And we ended up putting a lot of our stuff on that because that ultimately was the best way to hide the seams. But in my mind, I thought I could just get a lot of tall props and set deck. But we ended up, when you shoot it, you have a little bit of forced perspective. So the scenery falls very flat if it's not elevated in any way. So for this one, it's the beach. And we created sort of a slope for the actors to walk on the flat ground in this place called the Hero Square is what I keep calling it. Because you need to be, or we've always been taught, if you have any sort of backdrop or green screen, you need to be at minimum 14 feet away. And this volume is significantly smaller than that. So it pushed me to play with that relationship and like internal rule a lot. And a lot of our space will be sort of fuzzy in the background because the only place that the actors can look real within the volume is 10 feet away, which is that Hero Square. So I was trying to build a tall sort of horseshoe shape of whatever props I could find that would make sense. And it was fairly easy on a beach by getting rocks and big tall plants to cover that scene that you're talking about.
Now, and for decking, we mean also risers.
Yeah.
So we wanted to raise. We raise. It was risen. I can't do it. It was 6 inches above the ground. We lifted
floor.
Yes. We lifted the floor so that we kind of could avoid that seam at the bottom and that we wouldn't have to worry about it. Dustin, can you talk about the rules around distance, proximity to the LED volume for camera as well as talent? Esme touched on it a little bit, but maybe about where focus has to be and the technical around that.
The rules are don't have moire. And what moire is if you look through a screen door and you see these patterns, striations in not necessarily in the grid, but there's like this alternate pattern that happens. If you search moire on Google, you'll see immediately what I'm talking about. Anyway, that's an interaction between the camera sensor and the LED wall, because there's a grid on both. The camera sensor has pixels and the LED wall has pixels. And so it's an interaction between those two. And really you're just trying to have your aperture wide enough to where you avoid where the LED is blurry enough so you don't have that interaction happening.
You want to blur those pickles.
Exactly.
Pickles.
And
Pixels.
Yes. Yeah. And to blur the pickles, you can bring your actor forward in space or have a larger aperture. So anywhere from 1.1 to, or below if you have that particular lens, to 2.8. Anything beyond that, you'll just need to move in this particular space. Our volume was not very big. So we were limited to like a 2.8 range, maybe 3.2. But to get it to 4 or 5, 6, you would just need a larger space. And that just takes practice. And there's not a whole lot of charts out there currently. It's more about testing and also checking parallax between where the camera is and not being too askew so you see the curvature of the LED wall as well.
And so as a DP, and depending on the story, obviously it changes, but I'm used to shooting around a 4, 5, 6 split. And so when Dustin told me I had to be, regardless on what lens we were on, we had to be almost wide open. It was very much me testing that on our calibration days of just what would happen if you actually stopped down. And yep, you see moire pretty immediately. So the smaller the volume, the smaller the stage, and the higher the curve, the more intensity of the curve, the further you would ideally want to be away from the wall. You don't want to stick to too wide of lenses as well, and you want to be close to wide open. So just keep that in mind for technical and creative choices kind of merging together. Now here is our beach scene. You saw it in our plan here that Esme made, and here's the execution. Now, Dustin, I'm going to call on you again. Can you talk about that curve? Because in this photo we can see it.
Yes.
On the left side.
Yes.
So can you explain what is happening with the curve and why that happens?
That happens simply due to the angle of the LED being too sharp in contrast to its nearby neighbor, the next LED column. And they build these in columns to achieve that curvature. They made this particular, or Row had made this particular curvature because of the limits of their physical space. Ideally, it would be a wider curve. And you'll notice, I mean, the Row panels are awesome. You'll notice in cheaper panels that the curve, you wouldn't even be able to do this curvature. Like, you can spec panels that are way cheaper, but then you can only be shooting from straight on, for instance. And sometimes that is even dubious depending on how wide you're going as well. So, I mean, that's pretty good for what we had, but that's kind of a basic description of.
Fantastic, thank you.
Yeah.
Now, Mikey, can you talk to us about the creative intent behind building a beach with Esme? What you wanted to see, the creative conversations you had in prep, and the execution overall?
Yeah, of course. I'm trying to remember the moments that we had trying to figure this out. So yeah, let me try and run it back. So the biggest thing about emulating a beach is like the natural movement. So like wind, and for me that's like wind, sand, like reeds moving. And so we luckily had fans to make like those plants, those live plants move. And Esme did an amazing job replicating like sand without having sand next to technology, because like sand and water near like electric things is not great. Specifically screens that cost more than I want to think about. So we're very cautious about what we brought in there. The live plants were, I mean, this is all, I wish I could take credit for a quarter of this, but I can't. This is all like her genius brain. It's like, okay, we can pull this off. Let's do it like this. Let's throw some big rocks. Let's hide the screen from the floor. And it looks it looks good on this camera, and it's not even looking through the viewfinder. This is like an on-set photo. And so in the viewfinder of the camera, it even looks it looks just completely real.
Which we'll show in a second, a little clip from.
Ooh, fun. But now, thanks to my lovely production designer, every time I like turn on like a Mandalorian episode or like Ahsoka or like any, I don't know, sci-fi thing or anything that's new, and I see like, as I'll call it Esme's horseshoe design, I'll be like, oh, they're on a volume. Like they're trying to hide this shit. I know what that's like. But yeah, I mean, you take it. I kind of can't remember. You kind of just took it so gracefully and just was like, okay, you made it so flawless.
That's right. I mean, we were very lucky to use the reeds and kind of go with a more Pacific Northwest, East Coast beach vibe, because you don't really have that in LA. And I think it adds to our pirate ship crash atmosphere. A huge thing is you can't bring any sort of sand close to that sort of wall, especially if you're using fans, because they have something in it that's called silica, where if you're at the beach and you throw sand, you know, that sort of fuzzy bit that takes a lot longer to fall to the ground. That stuff is silica. So what we used can sometimes be a little bit more expensive, but it's play sand, and there's different things you can use, like coconut husk. Some people use like walnut rinds, which is pretty insane. But whatever it is, it can't have any element that float if you throw it. And 2, we covered a lot of the area with this things called dirt skins, which is basically canvas that has a layer of kind of sprayed foam, and then in this case sand, and so you can get darker ones that look like kind of construction site dirt.
Cool. And one of the things I'll talk about now is, so we've talked about the physical world, and then there was designing the virtual world that would merge seamlessly, hopefully, with within the scene. And so Dustin and his team and Esme, Mikey, and I sat around, and I think this is from the front, sat around and decided what type of clouds they were, what time of day it is, where the sun was positioned for shadow, and how fast those clouds would be moving. Because like Mikey said, with the natural environment, we want wind. And so if we're going to add wind in the physical world, we have to add it in the virtual world. And one of the considerations that Dustin and his team made was that you have to watch how many moving elements there are in the background, because it'll take up your CPU space and it won't match your frame rate. So that's just like another thing. If I'm missing anything, correct me, but that's just like another consideration of how many elements and what are our priorities of elements when determining how to build this world, right?
Yes. The main point is that every creative decision that you make, you're making in the virtual space. If you want something to move, it can move, and any number of things can move. It's more about trying to have that pre-planned far enough in advance to where the team can then build, if they need to build a physics engine specialized around moving trees or moving a whole field of grass, they want that to be optimized, and so then it's easy to control. Because you can have unlimited controls, but that doesn't mean that it's going to be performant and your frame rate is just going to drop. So trying to determine what we want to change when we get on site has a lot of value, because you can optimize those particular parts.
Thank you. Now, okay, great. Florian, can I get the lights, please? Thank you. Awesome. So this is going to be
what a shot.
What a shot. This is the beach scene, 10-second clip, just showing you from a close-up to a wide how those two worlds merged. Now that we know what they looked like in real life, let's see them through the camera. So, great. No sound, but. So as you can see, as we're watching it, and we'll just play it on a little bit of a loop here, Mikey, can you talk about the things that you saw through the viewfinder in comparison to real life, and what were the biggest considerations in the frame that you wanted to keep?
So the big thing is, like, for me, I was all about having movement, because, like, I myself sitting in this soundstage, I was like, okay, we are not on this beautiful beach. How am I going to fool myself as an audience member? I always try and do that when I'm just like kind of looking through the viewfinder. And again, having movement of the clouds was so big for me. Like, it kind of took me a second. I was like, oh yeah, we can do that. And Dustin was like, you know you can do that. And I was like, yeah, right. It's not a painted like backing, which is like my old school brain is like, oh yeah, clouds can move. And having that with the foreground, reeds moving, just kind of made this a lot more of a cozy scene for me. And cozy meaning, I think, just made me feel very comfy that this like felt real. So viewfinder versus what I saw in reality, like I had to hold my monitor just to base it and get my bearings of what it was. Because again, it looks very different when you're looking at it through the naked eye. It kind of looks like, I don't know, like a video game with like the graphics setting lowered.
Yeah.
To speed up your game, which I know very well. But through the camera, it looks really clean. It does not feel video gamey to me, at least. And I just wanted to protect, like, just the environment and this is such a funny scene, because what happens right after this is very revealing, and I'll just like leave it there. But just showcasing that he is in a new setting and having this movement around him was very helpful for the actor as well, because he's actually like looking around.
Yeah.
He's not looking at a green screen, right? He's not looking at like a fake wall. He's there. He's actually there. And so I'm having the same conversation with him, and I'm just like, dude, look around. Like, look, you are in such a beautiful place. He's just lost his friends, and he's like trying to find them, and he's like freaking out a little bit. But he kind of brings it back down and realizes like he's safe. It's gorgeous, whatever. And I was like, use the volume. Like, look around. Like, this is a peaceful ass place. I think in between takes, I like meditated because it was so beautiful. But like, I digress. It's just lovely to have that as a tool.
Yeah.
For talent, you know, to utilize, I guess.
Now, Jack, let's get your experience. So talk to us about, as an actor, you know, we're coming from green screen world a lot of the time, and because budget-wise, accessibility-wise, and our education around it, can you talk about existing on a beach that was built and how that might have changed the way that you worked within the environment?
Yeah, absolutely.
And Florian, let's get lights back on. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, it was integral. There's a very famous story about on the Goonies with John Michael Rivas Sr. and Dick Donner hiding the massive pirate ship from the kids so that they could film their genuine reaction. And it was so cool to have that on a big scale with the pirate ship, but otherwise even just on a little scale in a world where, you know, the practical can kind of dwindle for you know, a better budget, or making the budget rather, was so cool to be able to be on this set and like look around and see clouds, and even just those little things of grounding yourself and feeling more in the moment was really wonderful. We also just interviewed some people at AFI, and they were very VFX heavy in their movie, and they're talking about having to coach a child actor through the emotions of staring at a dragon, but it was a tennis ball, as many actors are well aware is it can be anything from a ship to a dragon to a tiger. We know that a tennis ball on a stick, and not having that was really cool. It was so intensely amazing to see these scenes from the small to the big and be able to react in real time to them. It's wonderful.
Fantastic. I'm going to move on to our next scene, which was on a pirate ship. So we have Esme's overhead here as well. Same considerations, I imagine, for kind of creating that arc around the space and depth. And one of the things here that we really did when we worked with the team, Dustin's team of Unreal Artists, was that we preloaded a lot of the props that Esme in real life was getting for the set, and we did that in the virtual world, so that if we had a barrel, we got that exact same barrel, or some almost pretty close, and put it right next to it, so that when it was out of focus, you could have a pretty seamless world. So here it is without the screen up. And Esme, can you talk about depth? Because we added in some foreground elements for this one as well that I think I can find. But yes, depth in the pirate ship world.
This one ended up being sort of tricky, and I really rented more than I thought we needed, and we definitely used all of it and could have used more. And a lot of that is to hide the seam, but also to make the ship feel a little bit more textured, because the transition, because we were on a pretty big ship, and the transition from my physical world to the digital world was a little bit dramatic in how far we saw, so would need more elements to kind of add to those levels of depth, if that makes sense. And two, it was another situation where we had a subtle force perspective, so use like every apple box that we had to raise some of the barrels up so that they matched the ones on screen. Does that sort of answer your question?
Yeah.
Can I piggyback on some of that?
Say, yeah.
Yeah. So earlier in the evening, Dustin mentioned assets. And when he says the word asset, he means like a physical set deck item or prop, like a book in the scene or a clock or a barrel, for example. So as Esme would shop at prop houses for physical set deck, our virtual production team and our designer and our director can also shop for assets on what is essentially a digital marketplace. Like you're shopping for health insurance on Covered California, or you're in a Sims.
Way easier.
Yeah,
But way easier, yeah.
Way easier.
Yeah, actually.
It's laid out for you.
It's like you're shopping on a Sims game and you're like, I want to buy this couch. So you can buy sets, or you can buy individual items, aka assets, or you can scan in your own set deck, and we'll talk about that later, and create from a physical item your own digital asset to manipulate with lights and shadows. And the other thing I want to talk about, we saw on our beach set that there were LED panels up above too. Now, we didn't have shots looking up to the sky, but you will see the clouds here. And in terms of movement, yes, we had physical fans on the stage, but another great help is having that LED panel up top allows for shadows to go across. So it's like we're in real life with actual cloud cover. So clouds could move over our actor's forehead and we would see shadows. So that adds
reflections.
to it. The reflections, yeah.
Absolutely.
So.
And Bree, I did want to ask you actually right after, so it's great that we're talking. Can you talk about prep, how maybe terrifying it was coming onto a set with a very low budget and hearing that you need to build a beach house, and pirate ship in 2 days, like live, we're doing it in camera. From a producer's standpoint, what happens?
You're like, oh shit. What am I gonna do? Well, I am going to work with all of my collaborators. The reality is, the successful organism is the organism that adapts, and even if you don't know how to do something, you just figure it out, and that's why you have a great team. And we were all beginners, so there were a lot of questions that we all had, and we would help each other out. And there was a lot of cross-departmental help. If we had a question or we weren't sure how to do something, somebody else would chime in and we'd figure it out together. But in prep, it's different because we know our usual scheduling and budgeting and, table reads and pre-production meetings that we have to have. But there are other elements in prep, like days scheduled for lens mapping and calibration with the lenses that we need to know before we even schedule a lens mapping and calibration day so that we can set it up with the LED panel. So there are just more things that need to be added into pre-production than normal. And also in production, our space on the physical sound stage, you're used to having crafty and a place for props, but now there's also a giant area where we have all of our virtual production crew and team and Dustin's team that we need to physically account for on the soundstage with tables and chairs and desktop computers and hard drives. So from budgeting to scheduling to physical crew on set, it is just more, but all of it is possible and not hard necessarily. It's just, I think if you can have people that are kind and graceful and patient with knowing that everybody's going through a learning curve, it's all possible. And we just figured it out.
And Dustin, I have a photo of you here that I'd love for you to talk about. Because we haven't seen yet what a setup looks like. Bree mentions we need an entire team of Unreal artists. We need our virtual production producer. We need supervisors for pushing the data from Unreal through Disguise onto the LED volume. Can you talk about what size of team we should expect for virtual production on set for crew, as well as what is necessary on set in general? Computers, monitors, how it's set up, what I'm seeing here. What are all the iPads for?
I personally go overboard on screens because I want to be surrounded with all the information all the time. I want every spreadsheet open, and I want a viewport into everyone's screen so I can be seeing them work. That's not necessarily normal, but it's what I do. I would suggest that so we had, in terms of physical space and personnel on ours as a comparison point, or a baseline to compare to other things. We had 2 6-foot tables up front. That was a disguise operator and an assistant to that, a tracking specialist.
Now, can you talk about what disguise is quickly as well?
Disguise is a platform upon which they have the ability to transmit through fiber networks the Unreal Engine environment to the LED wall. It's the hub for converting the virtual to physical, because the physical panels, the LED wall has an LED processor, but that just tells each panel what color it needs to be, and it sends the video out. It doesn't necessarily have any relationship to the Unreal Engine, to the actual thing that's building the environment. Now, the LED processor does help manage color as well, which is a whole nother thing, part of the process. Having a color specialist on from the beginning is incredibly valuable. You can make sure that from both an artistic perspective, that the wall has a LUT applied to maybe the end look that you're going for in the film, or the color reproduction, and making sure that's accurate for the lighting scenario that you're using, and to make sure that the props are matching the virtual environment. Now, that's more of an artistic element and may not fall under the color reproduction category, but there's a cross there between the color science.
Fantastic.
Behind those 2 people, we had 3 other 6-foot tables, and behind that was 2 more 6-foot tables. And we had 2 Unreal environment artists. We had an associate, a virtual production producer. We had me, and of course, you guys were always there, giving
welcome.
art direction.
I'm so sorry.
No, that's great. And so that for the Unreal environment, having at least 2 Unreal artists is incredibly valuable. Well, because you can be working on different parts of a scene in a multi-user session, and then having an associate virtual production producer to help find assets on the virtual marketplace was really cool.
And what we're seeing here is the assets that are loaded in props that we could put in and place onto our ship, correct?
Yes, that is me looking. I don't know which environment this is, but that's Unreal.
Those are the lanterns for the pirate ship.
Yes.
Yes.
That is Unreal, and in the bottom segment there are collections of assets that are particular to this scene.
Now, Mikey, can you talk about the dangers of control on set?
Dangers of control. Yeah, I think. Okay, so since we have like the control center here, right? Look, there's you, right?
Yeah.
That's you, like wondering if something. I'm just.
Yeah,
guessing,
totally. Yeah.
But you're probably saying, "Oh, can we just like move that over there?"
Yeah.
And
I'm looking at the net, I think, because that monitor is showing what we're working on. So we're working on the pirate ship net.
right.
Yeah.
And so it's just like, to go back to the Sims video game analogy here. It's like click and drag and then it's gone, basically. It's like the idiot's guide, which is very much what I read on how to do this. But basically, you can totally abuse the control. Like, honestly, I could do it. Anyone can do it because it's like so easily done. It's not like you need to fly in like construction and be like, okay, remove the wall, and like we all wait for 20 minutes. It's like instant.
Meaning if you want to add another net, add a net. If last minute you don't like the net, you can just delete it. It's gone out of the picture.
Correct. And I caught myself doing it once, and then I was like, ooh, I need to talk to my production designer. This is her world, you know?
Yeah.
And so like it took me a second to be like, okay, actually I need to have a huddle before I like call the play and don't tell anyone what the play is. So I think that's what you're circling, which is like important, because you have to remind yourself like this is a team product, and communication is so important for a healthy thing, no matter what it is. So I think it's very much like a nice reminder. At least that was my experience. Is like, okay, like let me chat with my team about this, because like I don't like that lamp. And this is also how I work, so maybe I'm bleeding into like answering another question, but like I always have to remind myself, like I hired all these wonderful people because they're good at what they do and I trust them, and so I'm not the person to make a choice for them. At the end of the day, I guess it's like if I like it or not, right? 'Cause that's like what the director does on movies. But yeah, I had to remind myself, like, okay, like yes, you can get rid of that thing, but like, you know, maybe Esme's like wants to like not fight me on it, but be like asking me why I want it removed, and then we have a conversation, and that to me is like filmmaking and like the fun problems of figuring out stuff.
Or historical accuracy.
There you go.
Totally.
There you go.
Now great. Florian, can we get lights? I'm going to show another clip. This is from our pirate ship scene. I'm so sorry it's going to be dark, but we are in the process of color at the moment, so this is going to be really dark. But after, it's like so bad with the color on this projector as well. So what I will do is after this, whoever is here in person, you can come on the screen and look at it because it's much more accurate on the laptop. And then if you are on the live stream, I will post stills to it after. But what I will do is maybe I'll turn my laptop, because this is a small enough room if you're in person for us to break it down. Maybe. If not, we will go through it afterwards. But pretty much what I'm showing on loop is a scene when they are on the pirate ship, and we have wet the actors with a mist. We have wind going, and we have the movement of the actual waves in the background as well. And so all you're seeing from a production design element is the blur of the lanterns are real, the wheel is real, rope, and then everything behind it, the wood, obviously the ocean, and we added lightning strikes in physical world for lighting as well as in our virtual world, which was really helpful.
You could just go back to the photo of that setup.
Yeah.
For comparison.
Let's do that.
So you barely saw what that was, but yeah. Okay.
This one? Yeah.
So that's what that was.
Yes.
Basically.
Yeah.
Just trying to illuminate a little
Yeah.
bit.
So.
And that's crazy to me.
Yeah.
It really
Very
is.
simple.
Yeah.
I know it's very hard to see, but
yeah.
I swear to God, with a proper screen that looks like a flippin' pirate ship.
Yeah. Now what I'll do is I'll move into our living room scene before we can get into kind of the overall. So our living room scene, we had to shoot it we flipped the world for this one and we crossed the line. And I'd love to talk about, Mikey, the considerations as a director when approaching a shot list about how many angles of view you have to decide on and lock before going into virtual production space.
For this scene or just in general?
In general, or for this scene as an example.
I honestly don't think about it. But then it probably hits me, and then I'm like, oh, I got to figure that out. So for like a horror thing where it's very much like on everybody and like on like the water bottle cap twisting open to like, I mean, we didn't go that heavy on like horror shot selection, but like you can see it, like in Scream is like the best way to do it. It's like close up on the popcorn and then close up on the phone, and it's just like a lot of like, look at this, and I tried to do a little bit of that without like shoving it in your face. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, having a virtual wall, like that's, yeah, so it ends like where the TV, like that TV is real. I'm having a hard time realizing what's real and fake, which is a good thing. So the platform is holding the table and the TV, and then everything beyond that is the volume. And understanding like how close I want to go on everyone, and like you said, jumping the line, I think is fun. Yeah. And like you're supposed to break the rules, right? So for this thing, flipping the world, because we got the other angle of it, I just basically had to understand like how much time we had.
Yeah.
How crazy I wanted to go, and then also remind myself to just keep it kind of simple all the while. It's a very, very muddy answer. But
Love it. And the reason I ask it for context is because as a DP, when I hear my director say, like, we're going to flip the world, normally that's okay. But in virtual production, I had to go to Dustin and his team immediately and say, we've decided last minute we're going to flip the world. And what that meant is he had to build out an entirely new view that didn't exist, obviously. So from building the walls with Esme to the color of the paint, or how textured the wall was, seeing the ocean outside, how high the ocean was, it's a stormy night, what are the waves, how fast are they going, are we lighting the waves, and from what angle? Am I having 2 moons to cheat? How much moonlight are we throwing through the walls to get this world flipped? And every consideration you have to make that normally if you build a set, maybe you have that, or if you're shooting in a house, maybe you flip the world and you set dress it and you deck it out. But for this, we just had to build an entirely new field of view. So it's a consideration, I'd say, for creatives when you're looking at the script, locking in the environments that your team has to build, that you do it as early as possible and that you have as much locked as you can so that we have more time to work on the creative parts of that scene. Dustin, can you talk about what it was like to, how it works in a world where we want to see out the windows, and how dangerous it can be? Because for the ocean, we had the ocean sometimes in the room with us, like it would go through the walls and stuff like that. So how does it work where you can move every aspect of the world around? And talking about like sun position, maybe. I don't know how to make this a concise question. I know you'll answer it in a concise manner though.
Outside these windows, I mean, yeah, you can cheat the perspective of any object. I mean, from the world to mountains to the ocean, raising the level, tilting it, whatever you need to do to achieve the look that you're going for. Perspective becomes more of an artistic choice than it does about necessarily needing to be flat or replicating reality at all. It's more about the feeling that you see outside the window. Like if you want the ocean to be turbulent, you pump up those physics and you make it more turbulent. And then, of course, you have to match the lighting that is in reality, or at least try to replicate that same directionality of light. So doing a whole lighting pass in the virtual space, as well as the initial collaboration between Esme and myself and our team, making sure that the props are aligning with that virtual space. And then they don't necessarily... What you find on the marketplace doesn't necessarily need to exactly match in color, because you can go into the material and change that color as well. Yeah, and
I will say that every single object we added in, we had to light, and so it had to match the lighting within the scene physically, but also virtually. Esme, can you talk about? I remember with the house. So pirate ship and beach we're not as familiar with because we don't live on a pirate ship and in a beach, but we live in houses, or we live in apartments, or we live in rooms, ideally. And so we're used to seeing that world and perspective. And so it's much harder to create and keep consistent. And so I remember at one point you were like, that door frame is just like way too big. And I kind of like had lost the plot because we had made this huge door frame, or we had the windows to scale were incorrect. And like can you talk about the importance of having perspective in the scenes that you're building?
Yes, I guess too, going to the living room, that was definitely the hardest set, which is unusual when you're talking about a pirate ship and a beach, because that's where we're quickest to see any sort of anomaly, because we go through a door frame every day, because we see windows every day, and we interact with these objects, and like there's standards of how high the doorknob needs to be. And the second you put it off by an inch, sometimes you can feel that it's not right. So with that, the living room is extremely tricky, and I think we even pushed it at kind of a funny perspective, so the whole room is pretty warped. But I want to go back to and say, with the pirate ship, we flipped that world too, which basically means the camera goes to the opposite side. And usually that's not a problem for me, because I create like a 360 world, walk away, pee, see some snacks, see what's going on. But here it's like the camera stays in the same place.
The exact same
And we
place.
basically put everything on a lazy Susan. I wish that would be fantastic. But
you could
have to
create
pick up-
that. You could create that.
New
probably.
business idea for
It
Esme.
would be
yeah.
pretty nice.
Nobody take it.
It's okay if you take it, because then I would get to use it and my life would be easier. But you have to move the couch, you have to move all of these objects and put them in the exact same place but mirrored. And I'm sure that had a lot of tricky things with your camera angles of like you're getting coverage from the opposite side of the actor, but your camera's in the same place. So it's trying to, in your head, spin everything in the right direction. And that ended up being a huge tricky part.
And I will say, as a DP and for my operators, that was really tough because not only are you trying to see the world and you're not moving the camera at all, but having to get an entirely new angle. So blocking is key, and prop placement is really key. Of like, the basket was there before, right? And so I have to just move it over. But because if you're shooting on a smaller stage, the considerations on the curve become important, because as soon as you begin to shoot not straight on, but come a little over, you begin to see that stacking that we had in the beach scene. And so can you talk about kind of field of view and how important that consideration is? Maybe just expanding on what I said a little.
Yeah, the field of view is quite important. It's related to the scale of the virtual environment to the real space and the volume that you're working in. So having a model that replicates the same dimensions of the LED volume, like that curvature, that horseshoe shape, and you drop that in your virtual space, you want your room to kind of match this same scale that you're seeing in you want your reality and your virtual space to match. So like scaling your virtual room to be that size will help you have an efficient starting point. For the pirate ship, I mean, we did things like we actually stretched the width of the ship. And if you look at a top-down perspective in that scene, it was like, oh, the ship is definitely stretched. Like, we just scaled it. And it looked really weird. But in the camera, it looked fine. And that was a way we added more depth and more space to the pirate ship itself to just give a little bit more breathing room.
And it's an interesting consideration as well, because normally as a head of department, you can pretty much light a scene without even having camera up and then do fine tweaks. And for production design, you can place things and know kind of what your depth is going to be and what your angle of view, field of view is going to be. But for this, you had to see a monitor up the whole time to make sure that any change you were making was matching the virtual world, or any change you made in the virtual world read on screen as accurate. Now I'll move into a little clip. So Florian, thanks Florian. She came as a guest, but I'm making her run. Thank you very much. So this is very quick. It is just cutting back and forth between two characters on loop. So here is that. And this is our living room scene during the day. So who thinks that in Ariana's shot, her and her husband are in the corner over here, so please talk to them after about her experience on set. I want to almost quiz people, but I know we can't because of live stream, on what props exist and what props don't exist, because that line becomes blurred very quickly. Yeah,
Can I just say, I already forgot.
Yeah, I was wondering the same thing.
I know that couch because it's in my office. It's my own couch, but I kind of forgot, honestly.
Yeah, and so this was the exact same scene, but during the day. So we didn't have to build a new world. We just had to light it with the sun out instead of the moon out. And then we just mirrored based off of where the window placement was in the virtual world, in the real world, that direction of light would match. And so you have to imagine that if a lot of our units were moving constantly, when we would kind of, because we had to shoot them almost straight on the screen and we couldn't shoot on the curve of the screen. And so, yeah, that's our daytime interior, everyone. Now here are just some stills. Florian, let's kill the lights. You'll see it a little bit, but for people who are here in person afterwards, I will show you on the laptop. This is a really good topic about VFX, because instead of in post, we were able to do everything in camera. And so this scene, we have the book floating, and I would love to talk about with Mikey the mix of the book floating and how we designed it with Dustin, and also Esme creating it in real life, and then we scanned it in, as well as we had a real drop of the book.
Yes.
So I'll play it, and then if we can see it, great.
I will just narrate also. Okay, so there's like a book that hovers off the shelf, has a Harry Potter moment, and then like drifts out of frame, and then like I basically am out of frame dropping a physical copy of the same book. And if I'm not mistaken, we scanned that book. So like that book that's floating is literally a carbon copy of it, just digitally. So like, yeah, so it just floats, goes out of frame, and then my, like, I'm surprised we can't see any of my body, but I'm just like hovering over Jack, sweaty, and I just throw the book like right on his crotch, and we made a like flawless transition. But the way we had to do that was like, you know, we had a very specific strategy of like how we were covering it, right? So there's like a quarter shot right there, and then like it definitely had to float out of frame for it to be real. Like that's just something I had to write and do because I knew that's the only way we could pull that off, unless we wanted to like really go heavy with VFX, I guess, post VFX. But since we had this available and I could see it and do it like immediately, I went for it, and I'm really happy with it.
Now, Dustin, can you talk about the parameters around how Mikey and you worked together to make the book float? You wanted to reveal it, and then it had to hit a light source. Mm-hmm. You had multiple light sources in the virtual world that were hitting it along the way. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I mean...
And let's get lights on if we can. Thanks.
So this scene took the most amount of lighting that we needed to do among our scenes in this case. We had those lamps around the edge of the room, downlighting, but we also... One of those lamps caused some reflection issues on our book, and so we had to add a virtual flag in there to darken, to make sure that that lamp was not hitting our book, and then hide that, so you couldn't see it through the camera perspective, that flag that existed. So you can make a flag anywhere and then black out the light and then hide the flag, and it still blocks out the light, but you don't see the flag. And then we lit the path along where the book is traveling so that it made enough sense from the general directionality of the light to where it would be highlighting at certain moments. With scanned objects, they have sharper polygons, and so they can have reflection issues. So doing it in virtual production comes with its challenges. So you may want to consider shooting a plate and then also doing it in reality, or doing it in virtual production reality. Yeah, but shooting the plate will just make sure that you're covered, so you can do post if you wish. Yeah, it's just trying to manage those polygons and make sure that the pathway is lit.
And so when we flipped the world when we were from the reverse on the back of the couch, we added in a foreground element that I think with Esme really helped sell it. And so that is what this is. We painted to match the world. Esme got a color that matched our walls. And we shot actually with the frame of the door out of focus where the monster passes by, and then we had the physical world and the virtual world. And so so I just want to applaud Esme for matching the exact paint color and Dustin's team for matching the wall color so that it looked seamless. I'm gonna get lights off again and we'll see if we can see it. If not, please come up after and I will show you, and I will post these stills for our live stream as well. Yeah, you can't see it at all, so you'll have to just come to my laptop. Yes, you will see the movement. So here is when we reverse the world, but the camera's almost in the exact same place, just pulled back. We have a slow push in, which reveals the window outside with the ocean and the waves. And then we have a cross of frame. Yeah, and so I will show people who are here and then I will post stills, but having that foreground element, I think whenever you can have a foreground element, that really sold it for us. for merging the worlds, and that's what's key. Now, I know we have to wrap things up in 5 minutes, but just to talk about, once again, maybe from a Bree standpoint, touching on how we laid out our crew. This, again, is exactly why it's important to have a plan. And I know Bree and Dustin made a plan on where virtual production team was going to go, and that they had to be in sight of the screen itself, so we couldn't block it with any lighting. So Bree, how many people did we have on our crew, and was it too many people for the stage that we had, or was it just enough? How did we manage that?
We probably had 40 people on set each day on average. And this was our soundstage, essentially. Like, there is the virtual production stage that we shot on, but probably just as big, if not 1.5 times bigger this way, was more soundstage of virtual production crew, staging, chairs, tables, desktops, camera equipment. Around the corner in another room, we had holding for art department and props. And then in another room, we had actors holding hair and makeup, green room, a meeting for department heads to discuss and problem solve. So that was another element of our location scout that was new to me, was going in with department heads and figuring out what we would need. And as you do it more and more, I'm sure you'll be like, okay, we need this. But since it was new for all of us, there were a lot of like points where I would ask Dustin, what do you need here? And then he would tell me. But for me as a producer, never having done a virtual production, it was so much of me being like, what do you need? Like going to every department and being like, what do you need? Okay, how does that affect Dustin's team? Dustin, what do you need? Okay, I need to go talk to Esme. And so there's a lot of just like communication, like Mikey said, is key for everything, especially when you're learning how to do something new, whether it's in camera and just what you're seeing, but also all the other elements of pre-production, meetings, storyboarding changes too, because now we have an entirely new department that is involved with storyboarding meetings instead of, the norm.
Yeah, absolutely. So here are just some extra stills of everything that after I encourage you to come up and take a look through, as well as our setups of how we were building the worlds, what was getting translated onto the screens. This is it in action. And as you can see, the world is moving based off the field of view and the lens that you choose. And that lens has to be dictated to the Unreal artists and the virtual production team so that the field of view is accurate for the depth of field that world has to have, as well as how much we are seeing.
I also want to point out on the camera, you'll see this black tube at the top. So in pre-production, there's the calibration and lens mapping pre-production days. Basically, those prep days are you put a lens on the camera, and that tube also signals up and reads the grid on the wall
to show you camera placement in the space.
Yes. So by the time you get to set, if at any point Indy's like, I have a new shot I want to do, you can do it because anytime the camera moves, it's already been calibrated to the grid. And I also want to say, why would you shoot in a living room on virtual production? Why not just build a regular set, for example? Wouldn't that be cheaper? Maybe, but we were using this as an educational experience to learn so many things about lighting and the sets, the walls, the foreground elements, the grandfather clock that we had physically as a set deck element, but we ended up scanning in because we were playing with shadows. So if you're going to your movie and you're trying to figure out what to shoot on the volume, you don't necessarily need to shoot every single set or scene on the volume. We did because it was part of this case study program and it was educational for all of us. But in prep, another element might be breaking down the budget to figure out what is most cost effective to shoot on location, or to build a practical set fully, or to do it with virtual production. Or maybe if you're needed to flip the living room upside down and everybody's floating in space and you defy gravity, like everything always depends.
Yes.
I also very quickly want to say that being here for the whole process, I was very lucky because I was part of the prep team as well. I prepped the camera. I was there every day in pre-production except for one. So I got to see the whole process and then actually get into the scene. But it was so cool and it was so wonderful, and the technology is beyond incredible, and it's still on, it's still a wave that's going forwards. There will be more screens and the cost will go down, but at the rate at which we were working for an educational project, it was still incredible, and I kind of it gives me goosebumps, and I shudder to think if you were running and gunning and had a budget and were paying people, what you could do would be beyond incredible. And that's not just a hypothetical. There are plenty of people that are doing that, a lot more outside of America. But so
That's great.
This is me saying, please shoot on virtual production so that we can get more virtual production sets.
Make it more
there.
accessible.
Yeah.
I told you I'd keep it to a tight hour. We went slightly over a tight hour. I think we went 5 minutes over. So it wasn't very tight. But for everyone listening on the live stream, thank you so much for joining us. For everyone in person, I will take 2 questions and then we can do personal questions when we have shut the live stream off, so that people who want to get drinks and food and hang out can do that and not feel the need to sit down anymore. But I know you raised your hand. Hi. Could you say your question? I will repeat it to the mic as well. Yeah.
Hey.
Hi.
Well, do you want to? I'm Ashley.
Hi, Ashley.
Can you talk a little bit more about actual budget numbers? Can you talk
Sure.
about the case study?
Yeah.
How to get involved?
Yes, I can talk about how to get involved, and then I think we could probably break down the budget. Budget was under $5,000 total, including post. And that was even an unexpected number because this was stage time was donated. How to get involved is Row Visual is a LED panel manufacturer. They are never going to rent their stage out because they supply the panels to the larger stages. They have an educational program to promote accessibility of learning in virtual production space for filmmakers that haven't. They've done 3 case studies so far, and they want to do, I believe, and he's going to get mad that I quoted this number because it's probably changed, but 50 to 60 over the next, 7 years, 6 years. And so the way to get involved is that you can go to Row Visual, their website, and in 2024, they will open up applications, and you will submit a short film script with specific limitations around it, constraints around what environment you're building, what the use case is, and it is all educational. So every single person that comes on is volunteering their time to learn. It cannot be a paid shoot for the limitations around being educational and competing with vendors and things like that. So you would go online ideally and submit your script, your intentions, and then they would get back to you and interview you. That will open in 2024. I'm not sure when. I think they want to get it up in the first quarter, but we'll see. But Row is a fantastic manufacturer. They have some of the best panels on the market, I believe. And yeah, that's how you get involved. As for numbers themselves, the majority of it was spent on props, things we needed to rent. Gear, they have a partnership with Keslow Camera, so all gear was donated. We shot on the Alexa 35. We had, my goodness, I chose our lenses, and oh my God, my Hawk family. We had Hawk lenses and yeah, all of our accessories and everything. And that was a good learning experience as well for crew that I was mentoring to come and have hands-on application with the gear. Prop budget, as well as kind of just crafty food. I think if there's anything else on set.
On set, no,
That's
maybe
it.
just rental trucks
True.
unexpectedly.
Getting a dolly there. Yeah.
Yeah. All of our crew was volunteering.
Yes.
That's huge. But if you were to pay crew, especially in the virtual production team, there are different levels of digital artists you could hire, like a junior, mid-level, or senior. And I'll let Dustin speak to how much on a non-volunteer crew basis film it might cost you per day, but it also depends on the level of experience of artists that you're hiring.
And for the length of that answer, I might save it for when we're doing an event after this, because I know rates fluctuate quite a bit because it's like a normal.
It's really based on the creative from my perspective.
Yeah. Great, cool. But that's probably like a summary answer for you, and we can talk more about it. We were there, three. We had like 2.5 days, I think.
I would say. Sorry. It was like not a full 3 days. We had a lot of time because we were like spooked because it was uncharted territory. So I was like, I don't want anyone to feel rushed. And I wanted to just have fun too, because everyone's donating their time. I wanted to make sure there were good snacks, like I have good morale, because like it's a learning experience. We're not going to yell at you if you don't get the shot, even though it's like our baby. But 3 days, and 3 days was like a good amount of time, I think. And we had 5 days to like be there. So there were 2 days
For mapping and calibration.
Yes, so technical things happened 2 days ahead of time. And then we had a nice wrap day. Like we finished early, and then like we got out of there and went to bed. It wasn't like insane, at least in my head. They're all like, oh, I'll never work with this asshole again. No.
True.
But I think that's what you have to take into account if you want to do this. It's like, give yourself enough time. People are volunteering their time. So like, make it like camp, make it fun. I don't know. Educational, yeah.
And we'll take one more question and then we'll wrap it up. And if not, great. Hi.
What challenges do you foresee if you were trying to do it multicam?
Okay, I'll repeat the question for anyone listening. What challenges do we perceive if it was a multicam shoot instead of single camera? Multicam, I mean, because I haven't done it and I don't want to create a fake answer, I'll ask Dustin because he probably has experience with that. So Dustin, what are some of those challenges if you had added in different cameras, multiple cameras, sorry?
Well, you had asked me on this shoot as well whether we could do multiple cameras, and I said yes, but.
Yes, but no.
The challenges are going to be those frustrums. For one, the frustrum is the reprojection of the camera in using the camera lens to basically create a cone of what the camera sees, and then a little bit of safety. So you want your cone of video that's reprojected onto the wall and viewing the virtual world to be the same cone aspect that the cone is of the camera itself. And so that's it's basically turning your real camera into a projector, and that projector is projecting onto the wall to replicate the world. Now in this particular setup we had at Row, we had a very small area where upstage where that curvature had not begun. And so if we were doing cross shot, then your other camera is simply just going to be seeing those vertical panels. And so that presented a challenge there. And then also making sure that your frustrums aren't crossing. Or you can use ghost frame, which is using 2 frustrums at the same time, or even 9 frustrums. You can have 9 cameras, 9 different perspectives at the same time. The other environments, you could even be 2 different scenes because it's reprojecting. It's splitting a second into 9 different possible images, and then those are being reprojected from the camera perspective onto the wall. Now, that's not the best for film because the LED wall, the appearance is the LED wall is just flashing constantly. It's just like fluttering at you. And that is annoying for actors. But it does make it technically achievable to do 9 cameras, or however many cameras you want. Probably less than 9. But just working around those limitations. Or you can set up a wall on wheels that moves around for that particular perspective. I mean, doing car process I've used lots of volumes that we just move the panels where we need them. We have a solid upstage, and then we turn the car, we turn the panels, we move the ceiling, and then a note on the ceiling too, just making sure, like in reflections, that gap doesn't show.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you can have a wild wall, pretty much, with panels on it that you can move to help you out.
Yeah.
Great. Awesome. Thank you guys so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. We will be around in person for about 40 minutes. We can get some snacks and some drinks for everyone joining us live. Thank you so much for joining us. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them, and we will do our best to get Dustin to answer them. Just kidding. We will try to all collectively answer them. He is just my guru in life and everything else. I love him. He's great. Use Dustin and our whole team, but for virtual production, this man has some great talent behind him. Thank you all for joining us. We can end our live stream, and that is a wrap, folks. Thanks.
Yeah.